Hey everyone, and welcome to the Property Podcast. Rob B here with Rob D, and this is episode 263. We've been working on this for a while. We're really excited, but we're bringing you a podcast that we are calling The Journey.
Yes, welcome to the Property Podcast, where every Thursday, property hubbers come together to get informed and inspired. Now, this is a very special week because it marks 5 years since we started the Property Podcast. We've been on quite a journey. I don't think we could have predicted a quarter of the things that have happened during that time. But one thing that's been consistent in those 5 years is that we've been telling you every week that property investment can change your life. And you must believe that on some level, otherwise you wouldn't still be listening to us. It's certainly not for the jokes. Now, we've given you a lot of information to help you do that. We've talked about the right mindset. We've talked about goals. We've talked about strategies. We've talked about research and targeting areas and looking at cycles. And that's all great. But at some point, you've actually got to do this. You've got to start from scratch, take action, expose yourself to risk, expose yourself to the challenges that inevitably go along with doing this. And often when you're doing that, it can feel pretty lonely. So to coincide with our 5th anniversary, we wanted to introduce a new type of episode to remind you that you're not the only one out there doing this. So today, Rob, we're going to be hearing from 3 Property Hub listeners and starting to follow them along their journey.
5 years, wow. Time certainly does fly when you're having fun. And that's why we're really excited about this new type of podcast we're bringing you. You're going to hear from 3 different hubbers, Andy, Sarah and Ian. And you're going to learn so much. You're going to learn from their successes, but probably just as much, if not more, from their mistakes or the current challenges they're currently working through right now. It's going to be so interesting to dig into their stories and make property a bit more real. So let's start by meeting Andy.
The name's Andrew Tew. I'm 59 this year. I was born in Birmingham, but I'm actually from Tamworth in Staffordshire. We are full-time property developers.
Welcome to the show, Andy. Well, we started off by asking how he got to the point of being a full-time developer.
We started doing it part-time whilst holding down a job. And we moved up to Nottingham, which is where we are now, end of September last year. 2 weeks ago, we finished our first property that's been sold. We're waiting for the keys for the second one. We're looking, as we speak, at buying the third one. We've attained a plot of land. We're trying to get permission to build a property on as well. So we're at the very start. We're only sort of 4 months or so into it. But because of what we've done historically, to coin a phrase, we hit the ground running and we know what we're doing and we're just going for it.
What a way to kick this off. That's such a strong, exciting start. One sold, about to start the second, and already a third on the way. Andy is really pushing it. But Rob, are they biting off more than they can chew? Or do you think Andy's experience will be enough to keep him on track?
Well, that's the beauty of this feature. We will find out. But it sounds like this isn't something you want to go straight into. You must have had some experience.
Well, we've always enjoyed property renovation. Me and my wife, the first house we bought to live in as a married couple was a derelict Victorian primary school. And we bought it with planning permission to build 2 4-bedroom detached homes. And this is going back to 1996. And we started doing property renovation on the side. So we've relocated, sold our house, and we've moved into a rented house. So we've been able to put £200,000 into the business pot as a jump start into property renovations. Although we've gathered lots and lots and lots and lots of knowledge along the way, we've never really had the funds available to do what we're doing now.
So he has the knowledge from being a surveyor, which gives me a lot of comfort. Money too, also important. And it's a big leap to put all that cash in and move across the country. So it seems he's fully committed to this. The mindset is absolutely on point.
Yes, sounds like he's all in, certainly. Let's find out about his plans in a little bit more detail.
The long-term goal is to obviously carry on doing what we're doing. We're looking at doing 3 renovation projects a year. In addition to that, alongside, we want to do new builds. So we'd like to do at least 1 new build project a year along with that, and then build up the new build and do less and less of the renovation side. Along with that, change of use things like commercial properties into flats and so forth. But taking it slightly a step further, we want to do build to let. So we want to get into the rental market as well. But the way we're looking at doing it is building a block of floor flats. Sell 2, keep 2 and rent them. So that's the long-term goal, along with spending a bit of time in Spain and Florida.
Some serious ambition there. I like it. And I like the sound of spending some time in Spain and Florida as well. Sounds like the payoff at the end of a lot of hard work. So it seems like a lot of thought has gone into this plan, which is great. One thing I've noticed is that there's not going to be any cash flow in the portfolio until further down the line. So to start with, Andy's going to be living project to project. First though, we know what Andy's long-term plan looks like. So let's zoom in and find out what the next 12 months looks like for Andy.
We're hoping to get the keys for our second project up here next week. We should be exchanging this week, completing next week. So obviously once we've got the keys, we'll be steaming into that in the next 2 weeks' time. And we work on a basis of a 12-week work turnaround from keys in the door from day one to keys to the agent 12 weeks later. So if you was to call in a month's time, we'll have been a third of the way through our next project. We will also be going through the process of buying our third property, and hopefully we'll have either acquired a piece of land to build on as well, or potentially, as I say, we already own a plot of land up in Derbyshire that we've got planning consultants trying to get permission on to build. So as soon as they get permission granted on that, we'll start building straight away. But it might be in a month's time, it might be in a year's time, we just don't know.
Loving this. So while the plot in Derbyshire is making its way through planning, Andy is not sitting around. Something we've always said on the podcast is take action. There's one thing you're going to do is do something. And it seems like Andy is absolutely living that and some. He's got a good understanding now of how long it takes to turn a house around, and I like that. So it's not just reckless ambition. There's been a lot of thought put into this, and he knows what's going to be involved. And while that's happening, he's also constantly keeping his eye out for the next project, so this momentum continues. And that's another thing as well, it's the momentum. That momentum is absolutely key. Now, he mentions about capital. Will he have enough to be able to keep on doing this?
We are in a position as a company to actually turn over more projects at any one time. But if we can't get the funding to turn the project over at the rate we want to, then obviously the wheels are turning slower than we want them to, and it's purely because the funding isn't there. So even with straight away putting £200,000 in the bank to start the business off, with individual mortgages to go along with that, it still isn't enough money to fund our business at the rate that we want to grow, if that makes sense.
So Andy is definitely not looking for an easy life. Executing on these plans is not going to be easy, but it really sounds like he's relishing the challenge.
It's a difficult one, really, because I say to people, we feel like we're in the lottery, because we've relocated, come to a lovely place that's fantastic. The family are involved in their own business, doing what we enjoy doing, and although we're going to work 5, 6 days, sometimes 7 days a week, coming home, having a shower, having something to eat and falling asleep on the settee because I'm so tired, it doesn't feel like you're going to work. It's, as you like saying yourselves, it's like living the dream. And I just keep saying to people, it is like winning the lottery, because we're doing what we want to do for ourselves in a really nice place, and it's all working. And we've made lots of contacts through yourselves at Property Hub and other people, other different professional bodies like estate agents and different tradesmen, and we're finding lots of people that want to share the story, help, advise, point you in the right direction. So that's probably the most rewarding thing. Obviously, it's still nice when we've just finished our first project up here, signed, sealed and delivered, and it's nice to stand back and go, we done that.
There's a bit of a cheesy saying which goes on along the lines of your attitude determines your latitude, and really your mindset plays a big part in how far you will go and achieve. And I think Andy's got a fantastic mindset, not just in his ambition, but also his gratitude for the position he's in, and also the opportunity he now has. In a way, he's already living a dream, and if he builds wealth at the same time, then he's just winning at life, isn't he? He's enjoying the lifestyle and the challenges that he'll face, and he seems to be meeting like-minded people along the way, which is huge because it can be lonely, this game. So that's really important. So that's Andy and his journey. So there's a few things there, Rob, that we said we'd come back to and discuss, that we could pull out some value and maybe give Andy some advice. But one thing is for sure, His journey is already exciting, and we definitely want to keep an eye on where he goes in the future.
Yeah, it sounds like every time we come back to him, he's going to have plenty of things going on. It's an ambitious plan, which is great. It sounds like it's been thought through. It's not just pie in the sky. He's got some experience, which is really important. But whenever looking at plans like this, it's worth focusing on what could slow you down, what could go wrong and throw a spanner into the works. And if you anticipate that early, you can do something about it before it becomes a problem in the first place. So one thing that Andy's already identified as a potential challenge is capital. And I said earlier that that's something that never really goes away. The kind of things that he's working on are capital-intensive projects. But this is something that, if he is concerned about it, he obviously knows how far his cash will stretch and he'll have done his own projections. But if he's worried about there being a shortfall, he could start looking into things like joint ventures. Now, joint ventures get talked about a lot in property, and when they do, I often sound a bit negative about them, but really, I just think it's not something that beginners should be messing with. Andy has experience already, and by the time cash does start to get tight, he's going to have even more of a track record to show. So I think he's actually in a great position to be using joint ventures as a source of finance. That's something that he'd do alongside mortgages, so important to have a good broker and keep on top of that side of things as well. But that's another stream that he can bring in. Getting those relationships up and running, though, does take time, so it's worth thinking about that early rather than waiting until the cash runs out and then starting to think what he can do about it.
Of course, there's bridging as well, and I don't think it's going to be the first time today we're going to hear bridging come up, so we'll talk about that and how to possibly use it later in the episode. One important point that we did pick up while we were listening to Andy's journey is the fact that he's just starting to think about getting properties in for cash flow, which I absolutely think, Rob, is key. Because at the moment, what he has is a property business, which is developing, but he does not have an investment portfolio. And that's actually where we spend most of our time talking about in the property podcast, because we see property as a way, to become wealthy or financially secure over the long term. And I'm really happy to hear that Andy is doing that, because so many people will get into property and get into this exciting stuff, flips, developments, whatever, and then never keep hold of any of the properties. And I've met enough people now over the years I've been in this who've said, you know what, I just wish I kept a few. People who've done flips and said, I wish I kept a few more, because they go back and look at what those properties are worth today because they just can't help themselves and just feel the pain because they've gone up so much. But not only have they gone up so much, they've also would have cash flowed that whole time too. Okay, so that's our first journey done. Thank you, Andy. Our next hubber up is Sarah.
My name is Sarah and I'm 42 and I'm originally from New Zealand, but I've been living in Teddington in London, which is in Richmond Borough, for the last 7 years. I have just started my own property company, which is mainly doing, hopefully, flips. And I work sort of with my husband as well. He's got an IT company, which I do the accounts for.
All right, welcome to the show, Sarah. Now, Sarah's not been in the UK all that long, really, but it sounds like she's already a decent way into her property journey.
Well, we've currently got 2 buy-to-lets. The first one I bought in 2013, and it's a 2-bed flat in Godalming, which I purchased with sitting tenants already in it, so it was quite easy to do the numbers on that one. So it was quite nice, sort of safe, dip my toe in the waters buy-to-let. And then the second one I purchased in 2015, and that's a 3-bed semi-detached house in Teddington, which is just around the corner, which is why we purchased it, but easy to manage. So those 2 we've kind of purchased to hopefully get capital growth out of, because we know they're quite good areas. And last year I set up a company that was initially going to be with a friend of mine, but he was not able to invest due to other constraints. So he introduced me to somebody called Simon, who is now my property manager, and we've started purchasing a property in Sheffield, which we are there to flip, really.
Great, strong start, and good to have the capital growth. But now getting more hands-on, and it looks like Sarah's starting to think that little bit longer term, which is great to see. Also looking at having a partner to speed things up, not something that should be done lightly, so we'll come back to that at the end. But before we do, let's get a bit deeper into her journey. So next we asked her how she got started.
My husband and I, we purchased our first house when we were 23, so that was a fair long time ago, and then we moved to the UK and left that one there as a rental property, and that kind of started us off and realising that that's quite a good way for us to sort of let the capital gains just sort of build up. Then we came to London, bought a flat in Queen's Park and promptly got pregnant. So we decided to sell that one and go back to New Zealand and have kids. So when we went back, we kept the one that we'd previously purchased and bought a new one. So we sort of had that rental in the background. Yeah, that's kind of what made us start on the property journey. And then we purchased one that needed to be done up. So in between, kids going to sleep, I'd be painting the house or landscaping.
This is something we hear a lot, Rob. We talk a lot about the importance of planning and having your goals and really being deliberate before you start out in property. But it's worth acknowledging that actually a lot of people end up in the position where they've got one property that they're renting out, maybe even two that's just come about through circumstance. And it's at that point that they go, oh, actually, this property looks pretty good. It started out as a bit of a hassle, but it's been bringing in money, might have had some capital growth, and it's that that's given them the inspiration to go on and start taking property more seriously.
Sarah's got plans, which is great to see. She's trying to be as adaptable as possible, and sometimes things don't plan out as you expect, but that's okay. She is very hands-on as well, doing painting and landscaping herself. Probably good for us to look at that at the end to see, is that a good use of her time? But let's look at her goals, because they are important.
Long-term goals. Generally, it's just freedom and to have our passive income from our property portfolio. That's the main aim. Last year, I was going through treatment for breast cancer, so our main aim is basically just to YOLO. You only live once, so we just want to make sure that we maximise life, really. And that's what really prompted me to start the flipping company, because it was actually one of my dreams, is just to do something that I love. And I love doing what I'm doing at the moment.
What was great to hear there is that for some people, property is just a means to an end. It's a way of getting to something else that you really want to be doing. For Sarah, the process is a reward in itself, which is great. And it's going to be so much easier for her to keep motivated when the going gets tough. However, that does not mean she's exempt from having good, solid, clear goals, so we might be giving her a little bit of a talking to about that later on. For now, though, Sarah's at a really exciting point, and she's quite rightly looking forward to the sale of this property, and not just for the financial reward.
I think the best bit's really still to come. When I sell that first flip, I'm going to be very, very happy, I think, because hopefully I will have made a beautiful home for someone, which is something that I keep in mind when I'm doing them, is to make them somewhere someone will really love to live, and it's a beautiful space. And I love watching it come together. It's so fun, putting the kitchen and all the design elements together and thinking, oh God, that actually works.
So just like we heard with Andy, it's not about buying something as cheap as possible and spending as little as possible on it, because that sometimes is a false economy. But general point for Sarah and everyone else is make sure you don't get too emotionally attached to a build you do and start overspending as well. Sarah's really enjoying this, and that's great, but there's going to be challenges along the way, and understandably, because this is property, she's already had a couple.
Oh, the biggest challenge I think I've found this year is the finance that we did on the flip that we're doing in Sheffield. So because I set it up in a limited company, the bridging finance was so painfully slow. It took 6 months. It took a good 6 to 8 weeks just for the bridging finance to get to approval stage. And then the solicitors then slowed it down, because there's 2 sets of solicitors, one for the bridging finance company, one for me. And it also meant that the pricing was quite a lot in terms of the solicitors. We sort of ended up paying near $2,000 just for legals. So that was something I didn't know going into the limited company structure. The other probably major one is costs. That's always a challenge, is working out how much something's going to cost to do up. And now that we've done the first one, we know some of the rough costs, but it's scaling that up to bigger projects and working out, okay, how much is that realistically going to cost each time, because we've just blown the budget as they always do.
So it really does sound like a painful experience, and doubly painful because bridging finance is meant to be the quick option. That's meant to be what you use when you don't want to wait around for a mortgage. But in this case, 6 months, that is a very long time. It can happen though. I've been involved in a lot of bridging transactions. I've seen them go through in a week, and I have seen them dragged out for a couple of months, not that long, but longer than people would have wanted. And it can happen because there's still checks to be made, there's legals to do, and yet when you've got a couple of sets of solicitors in there, there's always the potential for things to get slowed down. The great thing is, now Sarah's been through it once, she's far more aware of it. I'm not saying that she did anything wrong because I've no idea what the circumstances were. But what I do know is when it happens next time, she's going to be right on top of it, chasing people up as much as possible, maybe asking her broker to prioritise lenders who they know tend to work quickly rather than just the ones who seem to have the best rates. So these painful experiences will always happen, but the important thing is learning from them, seeing what you can do differently, and making sure that you don't have the same thing going wrong a second time. So let's look forward now and see what Sarah's got planned for the next 12 months.
12 months' time, I would like to have done, I'd tentatively say 2 flips, but given how long it's taken me to purchase the first flip, it took 6 months to buy that one. It was a painful one. So, yeah, 2 would be great if I can get 2 done this year.
Great. So exciting things in the works for Sarah. Yes, things do sometimes take a little bit longer to happen than you would like in property, but that's okay. Again, the momentum is happening. She's found some potentials and she's running the numbers. So it'll be really interesting to see where she's up to next time we catch up with her. Now, Rob, you've already talked about funding, and I think through every single journey, as we said in the last journey with Andy as well, it's going to come up a lot. But there's another discussion point that came up for me, which is about partnerships. Sarah just mentioned it in passing, but for me, a partnership in property is such a big deal that it shouldn't be done lightly.
Yeah, partnerships in property can be really powerful because you can bring together different skill sets. You can bring together somebody who's got the money with somebody who's got the time. There's lots of different ways of making it work. Not something to get into lightly, though. It is a business partnership. There's a lot of money involved. It's important to think carefully about who you're going into business with. It's best if it's someone who you know well, and also to be really clear about what you both want to get out of it. It's very easy to get swept up in the excitement at the start, but then realise that actually you've both got kind of different plans for what you want out of this. And in Sarah's case, it sounds like the person who she's doing this flip with isn't somebody who she knows particularly well. So even more important to really hammer out the details. Who's contributing what? What's going to happen if this thing goes wrong? What's the plan at the end? What's their target to sell it for? What if you can't sell it for that price? Really important things to work out. Another really important point in there that you made, Rob, is about emotional attachment. And this is where Sarah's enthusiasm and love for property could be a double-edged sword. Ultimately, what's happening in this business when you really boil it down is trading stock. That's what it is. It sounds very cold and clinical, but that's what it is. It is going to be someone's home as well, and Sarah's really focused on that, which is great because it means that she's going to come up with a better product. But it's really important not to get swept up in that and to keep sight of the fact that this is a business. So something worth keeping an eye on. And also, Rob, we said we'd come back to this one. We really can't let Sarah off without getting a bit clearer on those goals.
No, we cannot. It's not to pick on Sarah, it's to help her and help everyone listening, really, because so many people do this. What Sarah's done there, it's typical, it's the norm. And that's just having some goals, but being very vague, because people feel like if they've got some sort of goal, then they're doing all right, so they're doing better than most, which may be true, but if you're going to do it properly. All this work on refurbs and your property journey, spend a bit of time on the goals too, because it will give you so much more clarity. If you get very focused on what you want to achieve and the timeframes you expect that to take, then the decisions you make should be a lot better leading up to that goal, that endpoint. So saying you want an income from property investment is great, but try and get it down to the pound notes to say, okay, for me not to be able to work in the future, to be financially free, will be 20,000 a year, 40,000 a year, 80,000 a year, whatever your number is, get very clear on that. And then you can start to say, right, okay, so I'm going to need X amount of properties bringing in X amount of income, or I'm going to need portfolio size of X to sell so much off in the future. Whatever approach you take, there's all different ways of doing this. That's fine. But then the goal, a very clear goal, will then help you lay out a far more effective strategy.
Okay, so a few points for Sarah to think about there. Thank you so much for taking us along on your journey, and we look forward to catching up soon. Okay, now let's meet our final hubber whose journey we're going to be hearing about this week. And Rob, you should really be doing this bit, but in the finest traditions of Blind Date, what's your name and where'd you come from?
Yeah, I'm Ian Large and I'm 36 from Chelmsford in Essex. And I've just gone full-time on both our investment, and we've also started a construction company as well. So I think it's about 4 months into working from home full-time on the business.
So welcome to the show, Ian L. Let's find out where he is in his property journey right now.
We currently have a 9-bed HMO and 2 3-bed houses. but we're currently halfway through building a new 2-bed, and we're just waiting for planning permission to come back on the HMO to turn that into 3 individual houses. So it's quite a big year for us.
A big year indeed. So Ian's well and truly on his way. How did he get started?
My future business partner was house sitting for a family who ran bars in Portugal during the summer. And they just bought a new house close to the town centre and didn't want to leave it unattended. So Gordon moved in there, asked if I could move in as well. And we're 20 years old, living in a 5-bedroom house, inches away from the town centre. And obviously it was just party central. We went mad and had a wonderful 6 months there, repeated it again and just thought, hold on, we're having a lovely time here. Let's either rent somewhere or buy somewhere. And we knew a mortgage advisor through our drinking circle and ended up chatting to him and bought a 3-bedroom house together just because we're having a good time living together. Back in the day when it was a £400 mortgage on a 3-bedroom house between 2 of us, which was delightful, as you can imagine, for 2 21-year-olds.
Wow, not your typical start for Ian, but even so, at a young age, he really did grasp the benefits of investing, and starting off young can actually make a huge difference, and we'll talk about that at the end. But before we get there, we wanted to understand, what are Ian's long-term goals?
Just to be financially independent, as I'm sure everyone wants to be. I'm sure we'll always do something, and the developments we're doing now are a lot of fun, just to be able to do whatever we want to be able to do, whether it's a long-term holiday or another project, just to be able to do it and not have to worry at all.
So financial independence, a very common goal. In itself, though, as we've already talked about today, not a clear enough goal. Maybe Ian knows what financial independence means to him. If not, then again, really good idea to get a bit more clarity on that, because it just makes everything else so much easier. But broadly speaking, that's the goal. How's Ian going to achieve it?
Probably do more in terms of the developments. We partnered up with the brother-in-law of one of our other long-term friends, who's a builder. So we've partnered up, started a building company with him, and that's how we're doing the development. So having a great time doing those, and I'm going to look to do more.
Developments are clearly much bigger than a 2-up, 2-down refurb, and I know Ian knows that. But it's pleasing to see that he looks like he's starting to put together a experienced team with the brother-in-law of one of his friends. So I'm really keen to hear what the next 12 months look like for Ian.
The big plan for this year is get the 2-bed finished, get the HMO finished, and then our broker has worked out an exit package for us for both properties, or the 4 properties that'll then be, to the tune of 400,000 net profit. So then we need to have a little sit down and work out what we're going to use that to achieve.
Pretty quiet year then, all in all. Lots going on there. Ambitious plans, but it sounds like he's already got the end in mind and he's got that exit planned. And it really sounds like his broker is a critical part of the team. So often we talk about the importance of a good broker and what a difference it makes. Maybe, though, the next role that Ian needs to look out for in his team is a good letting agent.
The interpersonal problems from the HMO have probably been the biggest challenge. People locking themselves out late at night and having to stick my toolbox in the back of the car and drive over there at midnight to take their door apart so they can get in and get some sleep. Or I had one tenant attempt to food poison another, which was quite serious. Yeah, the HMO has offered its challenges as well as been a lovely plot for future opportunities.
Ouch. That's not something I envy, Rob, all that effort and drama. I agree, maybe next in his power team is working with a letting agent. That would seem like a great next step, but we'll come back to that at the end. Although it does sound like the responsibilities of managing the property sometimes go hand in hand with Ian's lifestyle.
The people that we've met along the way, one of the properties we had pre-financial crash was an old doctor's surgery that we took over and turned into a 7-bedroom. We were 24, we were renting the rooms out to young guys, mostly from Slovakia. And we were just partying with them day and night. We would walk into the tail end of their parties when we finished work. They would get up for work at the tail end of our parties. We just a ridiculous amount of drinking, and what a time we had. Oh, it was lovely. It was lovely. A lovely introduction to HMO ownership, living in the middle of it, drinking heavily with your tenants. Probably not something I'd want to do now.
I can't say that this is a way into property that I've heard many times before, but it's worked. And the great thing is, if you hear some of these stories in isolation, it sort of sounds a bit mad, and you think this does not sound like a firm foundation to be starting out in property. But Ian's really blended that with what sounds like being very clear on what he's doing and building the team and having the knowledge. And he's brought the two together really nicely. So now he's got property, which is really working for him. It sounds like he's going to have a very profitable year ahead of him. But it's also a social thing as well, and it's something that he's having fun with. And really, what better can you hope for than making a load of money doing something that you really enjoy?
Yeah, I'm really glad he was young when he started, Rob, because I don't think as many people further on in life would adapt to that early strategy that he took. But starting young, on a serious note, can make a huge difference to property investment. So those who are listening, who are young and ambitious to get going, that's absolutely awesome. Do all you can to start investing, because building that wealth snowball that will build up over time, it will turn into a much bigger number further down the track the earlier you get started. Now, for people who are a little bit mature listening, don't worry. It's not to say that you can't make great income and achieve great things through property, but time is a wonderful investment tool. But the earlier you get started with building a portfolio, it sounds pretty obvious, but it's going to make a huge difference to you.
Now, whatever age you are, having a good team is really important. We've already mentioned that Ian found himself a great broker, which is really paying off. But it might be time for him to build that team a bit further and get someone looking after those HMOs. We heard some pretty amazing things about what he has to do to keep those ticking over. It doesn't sound like something that he minds doing necessarily, but at some point Ian's going to have to look at the use of his time. He's got ambitious plans, and any time that he spends taking doors apart in the middle of the night or trying to stop tenants from poisoning each other, it's going to take his attention away from the bigger picture and might jeopardise his ability to do everything he wants to do.
Okay, so we've met Andy, Sarah and Ian. Thank you to all three of them for participating. It's going to be really exciting to check back in a few months' time to see what they've been up to. They've shared, so now they are very much accountable. But not only will this process help them by documenting their journeys, it's going to be really interesting for us to listen to. And we're going to learn loads as well. So many valuable takeaways already. So hopefully this installs the idea that they're just people too. Property investment isn't done by wizards and people with magic powers. They're just normal people getting on with it. They've all started forging a path that was right for them, all started in different ways, and that just shows you there's not necessarily a right way to get started, but the one thing they all have is they took action. So review time now, and thank you to these amazing hubbers. First up, we've got Jezza, who I can only assume is Jeremy Corbyn, and he says it's called The Property Podcast, but so much more than that. As well as easily accessible and well-presented advice on all manner of property investment-based topics, this podcast is full of useful tips, resources and life hacks, and that you can use both in your working and personal life, even if they've got nothing to do with property. Rob B and Rob D are easy to listen to and engaging. They make a great team. Even if you've only a passing interest in property, the podcast is well worth a listen. And thank you to Jeremy Corbyn there. Who knew, Rob? Jezza is actually a fan of property.
Yeah, didn't see that one coming. Maybe we can even get him to share his journey with us. But whether we can or not, we've got plenty of other people keen to do so. And we enjoyed it so much that we're going to be starting some more journeys next week. So you won't want to miss next Thursday's show, where we'll introduce you to more hubbers who've taken action, got started, and now you can follow the highs and lows as they go along their journey. So that's coming up next Thursday. But before then, we'll see you for Ask Rob and Rob on Tuesday. Until then, though, enjoy whatever you're doing. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to The Property Podcast. For show notes, all our past episodes, and to leave a review, go to thepropertyhub.net/podcast.